Well, hi, hello, folks. Happy Friday. My name is Katrina Kibben, managing editor of Recruiting Daily, and you are watching Recruiting Live. For people who are new here today, because I'm sure we have some new fans of Sedef on the line, um, I would like to welcome you, of course, and I want to tell you two things about Recruiting Live if you've never seen this format. The first thing you should know is that if you're expecting slides or something that's really overproduced, that's not what we do. Recruiting Live is about helping you. We want to create, we want to have conversations that are driven by your questions, and that's the second thing I want to tell you. So on your control panel for GoToWebinar, there's a questions tab. We'd like all of you to go over to that questions tab right now and test it out by saying hi. We will see it. I'll be monitoring that as we go through the conversation. And if there's anything Sedef or I say that you have a question on, or you have a personal scenario that you would like information on, tell us. By the way, if you don't want me to say your name when we talk about that personal one, tell me that too, because I do like to mention people by name, so you know, you have that little like, oh, hey, I'm here. All right, now let's get to my guest. Sedef, why don't you give people a little bit about your background and what you do?
Hi, my name is Sedef Buyukataman. I am very excited to be here. I am a lead consultant with Proactive Talent Strategies, whose logo I'm trying to get in the shop for you there. Prior to that, I've worked at big companies like Cisco, Nortel, Ernst & Young. I've worked at small companies, ThoughtWorks. They were super small when I worked there, and for a short period, SpaceX and then Sonos. And my background actually started in program university type of recruiting, but I've had experience in sort of all areas of HR, recruiting, employment branding, building better recruiting programs and operations and systems are sort of my passion, and talent personas are a huge, huge part of that. So I came here to talk to Katrina today a little bit more about talent personas because we started talking about this a while ago.
Exactly. So we did a panel webinar a little bit back, and we were talking about talent metrics specifically. And so recruiting personas came up as an opportunity to help you, further refine your metrics. And so when literally it dominated the conversation. The second we said the word, look at the little nose. The second we said personas, people's eyes lit up. You could almost sense that people were really excited about it. So we scheduled this almost immediately after that to make sure that we could talk more about recruiting personas. And in our pre-call, I think we realized that recruiting personas infiltrate every part of the recruiting process, from before you even identify a candidate to employee engagement. So let's back up one step and talk about what personas are to you.
Yeah, I'll talk about what personas are in the context of sort of how I came to personas, because I think the language, talent personas, candidate personas, or whatever, really only came into my life a couple of years ago. Before that, I've been using this model. And honestly, for me, it came from being a university recruiter. And those of you university recruiters out there, shout out to all of you. You're in season and you're at the webinar. You guys rock. And outside of that, you never get your recs approved on time to hit campus. Even for companies who have a fiscal year that's sort of October to October, you're thinking, hey, great, I'll have my recs. But you're the redheaded stepchild in recruiting, so your recs get approved last. And you've got to hit campus, and you got to know what you're looking for. So the persona idea for me was up there. Well, I know what this group of engineers, I don't know how many they're going to hire, but I know they're going to hire, and I know what they're looking for. Candidates with these types of degrees who participate in these types of extracurricular activities, who maybe have extra certifications in these areas, etc. And that helps me identify my outreach strategy, what clubs, what universities I was going to start with, what clubs, organizations, and events I was going to be a part of, how I was going to speak to that audience, because understanding that audience means understanding the language that they speak, what's going to resonate with them, translating all of that. and then bringing it into my assessment process. What's going to be challenging for them, and also get me the right metrics to evaluate these candidates on. If they're interns, the intern experience can be driven by those personas, and then obviously the offer, onboarding, and then the rest of the employee journey. So for me, it really stems from having to let the bureaucratic process of rec approvals happen while still performing an outreach and sort of recruitment program. And that's where the idea of persona came from for me. And then taking it into the other roles in HR, I've led HR departments. It's an ecosystem. When talent attraction and talent engagement and talent development are all working off the same personas, then the employee journey becomes that much more fluid, organic, relevant, informative, engaging, nirvana. So all I'm saying is personas are great.
Yeah, no, and I think they, like we were saying, they inform so many elements. You're able to actually like, it's less of a, we need a person, and it's, you know, this type of person. And I imagine that it impacts fit down the road, right? You don't have as many culture fit issues once you've moved farther into the process.
And if you've done your branding, your recruitment marketing effectively, those candidates have already self-selected out before they even apply. And, you know, I think people get scared by some of this stuff. I won't have the same volume of applications. But if you do it right, the applications you have will be people who are already sort of bought into the vision of where you're going and the culture of how you want to get there. So how they interact with their peers, how they'll interact with you is very, very similar. And so, you know, these things can help inform your decisions when you're reaching out by just understanding. You know, if I were a detective and I was trying to sort of solve a case, I'd build profiles of potential suspects. Well, this is the same thing. We just happen to call them personas. You know, I don't like that I am a Muslim American and get profiled at the airport occasionally, but it's effective in its own ways. And, you know, there's a reason behind it, and we can use them in positive ways as well, too. Advertising has been segmenting audiences for decades, and understanding the emotional responses that we're going to have when we see that annual holiday Coca-Cola commercial with the polar bears, and we all melt and want a Coke. So, you know, these are things that it's just different terminology, but they're in practice in almost every sort of decision-making processes that businesses make. So why not have them in one of the most important functions, talent?
Absolutely. So let's start at the, you know, we all know we need personas, right? So we can head nod to that. So how might you start your research? Where did you start your research when you were doing university recruiting?
I think one of the things that people get scared by is it feels like, how am I going to figure all of this out? But if you simply look inward to your company and look at each of your business teams and units and lines, and look for the star performers, the people who are exceptional at what they do. When you speak to their leaders, you hear comments like, oh, I wish I had 5 bobs and 6 chains. You know, you can do this at a small startup because you can actually physically point to the people within the office sometimes.
Right.
But as the organization grows, it becomes more challenging, and I understand that. But I think the more conversations you have internally with your team, understanding, number one, what are the business priorities? Where does this business want to grow next year? What sort of skills is it going to take to get them there? If this business is all about building new software platforms, then it sounds like they're going to need some software developers and some testers and some product managers and a few other things, UX and data analysts that go along with that. That could be your launching point. And then go look, who are the data analysts within your organization who are really, really killing it? Who are the folks that you want more of? And have conversations with them. Ask them, where do they go to school? You know, if you don't have access to this information in the HRS, where did they go to school? What sort of extracurricular activities resonated with them? And then now today, where do they go to learn? Where do they go to get their news? What sort of gurus in their industry do they follow? What sort of professional organizations resonate with them? Not just the usual, but which ones would they go to if they had the opportunity to go? And what sort of technologies are interesting for them? And also, where is their expertise? Because you're going to use these people later as you push out to attract talent. And just by getting some of these basics and information, you can begin to build that profile and say, you know, I talked to 3 or 4 of these people, and they all seem to say that GitHub dot blah, blah, blah is where they need to be to get cutting edge of their info. So let's figure out if there's a way we can be relevant in that particular digital channel. Can we sponsor an event? Can we throw down a challenge? Can we post a white paper? Can we do tech talks online or in person? Can we set up a networking event? Could be all sorts of things, but you've now focused in on a few different channels, and you're starting to learn the language there and what will resonate with those channels. And all of that was informed by the personas that you built just by talking to your internal team.
Exactly.
It's sort of that theory, you know, it's that theory of like attracting like. The idea is you don't want to talk to just one person. You know, you don't just want to talk to Bob. If you can talk to 10 Bobs, that'd be awesome. And preferably have those Bobs be from different ethnic backgrounds, gender backgrounds, different parts of the world if you happen to be a global company. So you can get a little bit more diversity in there so you're not just attracting Bob, but the bigger idea of what Bob might represent in each of the markets that you recruit in.
Yeah, and even more tactically, you might be able to use some of those data points in Boolean strings, in X-ray, you know, on your custom search engines, and save those with your persona definitions so that future teams can look back on that and not just have the story of the great people, but have the tactical pieces too, so that, again, like a sourcer could take that Boolean string and be more informed than just the skill, than just the job title, because there is more to it.
Yeah. And if you don't have access to your sort of business stakeholders to go be talking to Bobs across your organization, you can have a couple meetings with your own recruiters who probably know their hiring managers and their needs and their yeses and their nos almost instinctively. You can build a framework from that to get yourself started, and then have that go inform who internally, business stakeholder-wise, you can talk to help flesh out those personas. Candidates that you meet along the way can help you flesh out those personas as well. You know when you have a star candidate in process, asking them a few more questions about how they found this position and what really resonated with them as they went through while they're still hot and bothered by your company, not that bad an idea to do. And all of that can be logged into a persona that you continue to develop and enhance for these roles. So there's a lot of different ways to get there. It's I think it's about demystifying this idea because it's new terminology for us. It's, what's a persona? Every time I speak about personas, there's a ton of questions, and I'm glad that there are, because it's something about the ideas resonating with folks. They just need to sort of get past their own fear of, what if I don't do it right? Your personas never end. They constantly evolve. You're constantly adding more information to them. And as each workforce plan comes out, each hiring priority shifts, you can amp up or amp down your attraction and engagement and your focus on those particular personas as needed based on the candidates that are going to go through your pipeline.
Exactly. And it can only help you build better relationships with hiring managers too. So backstory, when I was in a very marketing focused role, right, we had personas. This is, it's marketing, it's recruiting. We've had that conversation. I will not repeat it. But what we did was we kind of boiled down to 4 customer types. And so when we were deciding what products we were going to develop, we would say, who is this for? Which one of these people, and start to inform our marketing with that. And I think when it translates to recruiting, you can go to a hiring manager and say, okay, I want you to look at these 4 types of people that do really well in this organization. Which one do you think is going to be the best fit for this role? What personality type do you need on your team that we can, move this over?
Yeah. And those intake meetings with your hiring managers can move you to, instead of taking notes and listening, you can actually be sharing candidate profiles that are sort of already in your database because you've been sourcing on these personas. And even if you haven't had the downtime to do a whole lot of proactive sourcing, you have candidates in the past. They don't necessarily have to be viable candidates for that individual to hire. These could potentially be candidates who have already been hired, but you could bring up these resumes again and say, is this the type of person we're talking about here? And have your manager sort of live edit with you. It's a much more interactive discussion when you've got something to speak from. And that persona can sort of help you in those discussions as well, too.
Totally. We just had a few questions come in, so I want to jump to those. Jag was wondering, how could you use personas to figure out what's not working? So how might personas inform a change?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think personas are about sort of, the trial and error process to get there. You have to test some things. Nothing's 100% resonant with every single persona you're going after. But measurement is a huge part where personas can help you. If you're doing an outreach campaign, if you're targeting specific personas for that campaign, the influx of candidates that you get back, the return on your investment, how you're tracking that, are they coming from the sites that you put them in? It can be a way to say, you know what, we thought that Hub was the right place for persona A, but turns out none of them are coming in. But strangely enough, persona C seems to be responding to this, so let's go back and recalibrate. Yeah. So I think, everything that you do these days has a platform and a tool that allows for some measurement. We should be taking advantage of that. As we build out these programs, I can't tell you how many clients I speak to that they've thought of this fantastic idea for a strategy. And when I ask them, that's great, what's going to happen after this one particular event? What's the engagement going to be? How are you going to measure what happened? They don't necessarily know or have thought through the what happens next. And measurement is a key part of validating what you're doing. So I think it's a great question. I hope I answered it, but looking at the results of your outreach in recruiting can be a great way to validate this particular message or this particular channel does not resonate with this audience.
Yeah, and you also got me thinking about using personas as a response to a problem in your organization. So, for example, if I was seeing retention start to, if we were seeing a huge drop off from a specific department or even across the organization, I think you might go back to personas and go, okay, so we need to talk to people who are staying. What makes them stay? And starting to add some of that to reform to, actually change. Exactly.
That's a great point, and that's one that I've built into my sort of persona interview questions, especially if you're speaking to someone. I've worked at large corporations like Cisco where people have been there 10, 20 years. And yes, I asked them why they came here and what their experience was, but I also asked them why they stay. I'm sure they get out their offers, recruited to war for talent, whatever. People are getting pinged left, right, and center with jobs, whether they're relevant to their profile or not. But, that I think is a very important question on the area of retention. Why do you stay? I don't have an alternative can be an answer that you might need to hear as leadership team.
Absolutely. And Michael Townsend added, and it changes the intake meeting from into a strategy session, right?
Yeah.
Because instead of going, tell me about, which will get you a range of answers based on the person you're asking, instead you're like, talk to me about your team. Where do you need more balance, right? Let me show you the types of people that perform well here based on my research. It really shifts things. Yeah.
If your whole HR organization is operating from the same personas, it also, those conversations we wish we had as recruiters with HR business partners and vice versa about really planning the growth strategically for that organization can be a lot healthier and a lot more fluid, a lot more organic, and a lot more frequent. If you're all operating off the same profile, it becomes one language that you're using with the business as well to sort of be more strategic and help them think through.
Yeah. And Do you notice, this is another question from Jag, who thank you so much for being here and asking such great questions. Um, as you're building personas, have you noticed trends in the data across people? Like, what types of trends do you typically see, or what might people be looking out for?
Well, a lot of my most recent experience has been in tech. And, when you think about tech, you think about the engineers and the actual technical scientists and staff. But we work in tech too, HR professionals, finance professionals, marketing professionals. We're sort of the infrastructure of tech. And there is a unique persona to tech infrastructure personality. I may not have much in common with my colleagues in finance, other than the work culture that I want to work in. And you can begin to see trends like that within sectors. And those will resonate across personas that may not have anything from a skill level that to do with anything else, but the cultural needs, how people like to be rewarded, the recognition that they get. All of that can be very similar between very disparate groups, and that can be your indicator that this person belongs in this business sector. What we want in finance might be different than what we want in tech, in retail, in manufacturing. And so the cultural attributes of what folks are after can definitely trend across all profiles.
That makes sense. So, how might an agency recruiter use personas?
Well, often agency recruiters have repeat business with customers. It's not necessarily sort of a fast food type of relationship, at least from my experience that I've seen. So I think getting to understand the overall relationship you've had, bringing that consistency in. Now, you may be getting very disparate roles, but oftentimes I also see that agencies are sought out for specialist functions and specialist organizations. So as you're building a relationship with a new client, I suggest you add some of these broader questions in, why does your team stay? What are some of the things you use to sell candidates on these opportunities in this role? Broaden your intake questions with them to increase to some of that, and then you can build personas around just an individual search. Reference it back and forth, and also, you can build your own internal personas by looking at your client portfolio. What sort of business are you going after? There's very few recruiters I know who don't personally specialize in a particular sort of type of recruiting, either a skill set, a style, or an approach. So if you focused your business, your client portfolio should show some trends in the type of candidates you hire, and you can do your internal tagging. So when you're having those, again, intake meetings with new clients or with a new engagement, you can bring up other candidates and say, is this the type of thing that you're talking about if you've done the tagging well for your own personas?
Absolutely. And I imagine an agency who walks in, by doing a lot of research and then presenting personas with candidate profiles, that's going to make them stand out a lot from the average agency. I mean, I've never heard of an agency bringing in personas, but the second we started talking about it, I was like, that's kind of brilliant.
It could totally work, especially if you know what you're going after in terms of the type of customer, the type of candidate. I've been an internal practitioner for the better part of my career, and so when I look at an agency or a company, I'm also looking at the potential database that they may already have walking into the picture. So if you walk up with personas, that makes the case that you know your area of expertise that much stronger.
And human motivation, which I know is a topic that Derek Zeller, and he wrote a great post about it, about this guy who all he wanted was a second screen. He didn't care about more money, all the traditional motivations. It wasn't about that. And great recruiting is about dialing into what truly motivates people, and that's another important trend that you should recognize.
Absolutely, and that's what the persona is all about. It's understanding your audience, what motivates them, and what their expectations are. You're never, I think when you do the sort of program type of high volume recruiting, you've got to be able to get people through a process that is kind of a cattle call. So personas in that aspect help me as a practitioner give people an individual experience that resonated with them. When you're doing the one-to-one recruiting for roles, people should be having a real experience with you. You should be getting to know them. if you want to impact them enough to make one of the most important decisions of their lives where they work, then you should take a little bit of time to understand what actually motivates this person. Because for a lot of us in this economy, it's not necessarily the brand name of your company or how much you're paying them. It's the experience they're going to have working there.
Exactly, because we have started to realize, and I think this is also a generational trend, which is a topic that I'm always a little leery to touch on because fundamentally generations are very similar, but there are nuances. And one of the big nuances that a lot of research is consistently showing right now is that motivation over money for millennials and this younger generation that's coming into the workforce.
This is a values-based economy. Like, I believe Gen X has these attributes. We're just so small and smushed up in the middle of the boomers and the millennials that nobody notices us. But there was a Pew study that came out this summer about millennials, and it was 50% of millennials will not even purchase goods from companies whose values they don't believe in. You better believe they're not going to work there either. And so either we need to do a better job as organizations of letting them know genuinely what our values are outside of corporate speak and letting some authentic messages come through, or we're going to lose some of the best talent in the marketplace and also their money.
Exactly. Michael just added, Gen X has always been the redheaded stepchild of generation talks.
Our time is coming.
It has to. It will, and I think those generational elements and doing some research outside of the organization can add some details and information to those personas that you're building, right? So it's not just solely the interviews, but you can look at those bigger research studies like you were referencing to inform some of
You
that.
look at the bigger research studies. You can do surveys with your candidates who weren't successful through the process or who were, or employee pulse surveys. External research is always available, either paid or just following your market, following your personas news feeds and seeing sort of what's changing and happening with them. There's just different ways that you can bring a whole melting pot of information, because we're three-dimensional as individuals. We're probably more than three-dimensional, but when it comes down to it, it's not ever going to be one thing that makes someone make a decision. It's going to be a whole myriad of experiences that resonate into how they feel about you as a company, as an employer, as an opportunity. And if you can just simply put the authentic, here's what I've got to offer out there, in the right language for those folks, I think, with that thinking of people want to work with people whose mission they understand and whose values that they can sort of line up with.
Yep, absolutely. I think the people on the call are really catching on to this idea of agency personas. So we'll do this one last question, and then we're done. I can't believe that half hour just flew. I looked up and I was like, 30 minutes? What the heck? Okay. Would you suggest building personas for hiring managers? So kind of understanding that from the agency perspective.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. Hell yes. I think that's a fantastic way to get started. And then, you can expand on those as different hiring managers sort of come into play that have similar requests. But yeah, that's a great way to approach it.
Absolutely. And I bet that's a great way to coach new people to an agency, to teach them about these are the types of hiring managers we work with. These are their frequent no's. This is how they communicate that they're angry. However, right? Great training material.
Every in-house recruiting team I've ever worked on has struggled with an appropriate onboarding process for recruiters that's effective. I think a hiring manager persona rundown would be a great place to start.
Absolutely.
Your recruiters are hiring people like themselves as well, too. It's all going to tie in.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, that's our time. Sedef, thank you so much. That was so informative. I know people are walking away from this with very specific action items, whether they're on the agency or in-house side, to be able to go and do this, because you're awesome. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
you. It was 100% my pleasure and anytime. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
so anybody, if you want to find Sedef, her name is under her image, so you can source her. Next week on Recruiting Live, we're doing a special Veterans Day edition with Erin Daniels, who is a former veteran, and we're actually going to walk through how you build searches to include veteran populations, communities that are great for sourcing veterans. We're going to be very action oriented on how you get more veterans into your pipeline because they are a huge untapped candidate market.
I love
So
that.
thank you again for everyone who's here, and we will see you next week. This recording, I'll let you know when it's live. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.